Hello, welcome to the World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. Andy Burnham waiting in the wings to become Britain's next Prime Minister on Monday. US President Donald Trump claims China tried to interfere with the 2020 US elections. The World Health Organization calling for funding to help organize the organization and Africa CDC to curb the outbreak of Ebola. Let's begin the World Today. Thanks again for joining us on the program. I'm ready to lead. That's the commitment of Andy Burnham, the man on course to become Britain's next Prime Minister on Monday. Earlier today, Burnham was elected unopposed as Labour Party leader. The former mayor of Greater Manchester returned to the House of Commons last month as MP for Makerfield, with outgoing Prime Minister Keir Starmer stepping down ahead of an imminent challenge. He used a speech today to rail against neoliberalism, saying the British government had turned its back on the people.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, all.
Following the resignation of Sir Keir Starmer as Labour's leader, the NEC set out the procedures and timetable for a contest to seek his replacement. The returning officer has informed me that the requirements of that contest have now been met. It's hardly a nail-biter, folks. And so, despite the efforts of a lone MP, I can confirm that there was only one eligibly nominated candidate. Following the period of nominations by Labour MPs, one candidate received 379 nominations. Having met the threshold of 20% of the Parliamentary Labour Party, they were eligible to proceed to the next stage. One other candidate received one nomination and is not eligible to proceed. Among the affiliated trade unions and socialist societies, the one eligible candidate received 23 nominations in total. This included nominations from all 11 trade unions, comprising well over 5% of the affiliated membership. There being no other eligibly nominated candidate, it is therefore my honour to declare that the duly elected leader of the Labour Party is Andy Burnham.
Thank you so much, friends. What a moment. And what backing you've given me. All our affiliated trade unions, all our socialist societies, 379 of our MPs, and I don't need to say commiserations to Catherine West, because she backed me too. Thanks, Catherine.
Let's check in on the ongoing war now between the US and Iran, which has accused the United States of hitting civilian infrastructure in its latest wave of airstrikes since peace talks collapsed. According to state media and provisional authorities, bridges, a train station, and an airport were hit. The BBC confirmed an attack on a bridge in Hormozgan province. U.S. Central Command has not given a list of targets, but said the attacks were intended to further degrade Iranian military capabilities. President Donald Trump has threatened to hit Iranian bridges and power stations to force Tehran to return to talks to end the war that began on February 28th, with the U.S. and Israeli attacks prompting Iran to retaliate against Israel and U.S. targets and allies in the Gulf. For 6 nights in a row, the U.S. has been carrying out airstrikes against Iranian targets. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has warned of alleged threats to U.S. election voting machines from China and Russia, while accusing Beijing of interfering in the country's 2020 elections ahead of the midterms. In an address to the nation, President Trump said he is declassifying documents he claims reveal election vulnerabilities and supports his allegation that China tried to influence the 2020 presidential election in Joe Biden's favor. He's also accused China of the illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files, including voters' personal information.
We're publishing a series of previously classified U.S. intelligence community assessments and other reports proving that our government has long known these machines are extremely exposed to attack. As one assessment states, we judge that the United States adversaries, including, at a minimum, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure. The document goes on to further state that, quote, we assess that centralized election-related data repositories, such as voter registration databases, poll books, and other official election websites, are most vulnerable to exploitation, and adversaries could use this access to these systems to disrupt election processes within the United States of America. We're releasing all of those findings, and spanning from January 2020 to June 2026, this is a cyber threat aimed at the very heart of our democracy.
Well, China has rejected President Trump's claim of interference in the 2020 election, calling the allegation pure fabrications and malicious smears. During a press briefing today, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian stressed that China has always adhered to the principle of non-interference in internal affairs. It has no interest in and has never interfered with U.S. elections. He urged the U.S. to engage in self-reflection and refrain from using China as a political tool in its elections and do more to promote China-U.S. relations. Lin also commented on Trump's administration's announcement of new visa restrictions on Thursday, limiting stays for most foreign journalists in the U.S. to 240 days and Chinese journalists to 90 days. Lin condemned the rules as discriminatory and demanded that Washington reverse them. The decision revives a years-long visa dispute between Washington and Beijing. Tensions briefly eased in 2021 when both countries agreed to issue 1 year, multiple entry visas to each other's journalists. The new Department of Homeland Security policy replaces the previous system with fixed limits on how long foreign reporters can remain in the United States. Checking in on the weather in Chile, dozens of families have been evacuated in the municipality of Penco as flooding causes the sea to surge into Licán. The National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response has ordered the evacuation of the coastal edge in the Malaquias, Concha, and Berrio Chino sectors after the waves exceeded the shoreline and entered homes. Mayor of Penco, Rodrigo Vera, noted that some streets would remain closed, assuring that the important thing here is to protect the safety and lives of families. Regional authorities are continuing to monitor the situation in Penco and other coastal communes in Biobío, while weather conditions are expected to continue worsening in the coming hours. Meanwhile, Spanish emergency services and the Guardia Civil are battling the major wildfire near Lozoyela as flames threaten nearby communities, forcing evacuations and confinement orders. In the Guardia Civil in the Sierra Norte, north of Madrid, thick smoke billows above wooded hillsides as officers deploy along affected roads. The blaze prompted authorities to activate Level 2 of the Community of Madrid's informal wildfire emergency plan. Residents in the villages of Cinco Villas and Mayron are ordered to remain indoors while precautionary evacuations were carried out at isolated residences and the San Lazaro area near Buturriaro del Lozoya. The Guardia Civil remains deployed to secure the area and assist with evacuations, while firefighters, forest crews, civil protection teams, and the military emergency unit continue efforts to bring the blaze under control. The wildfire is one of several burning across Spain, where a prolonged heat wave has left vegetation tinder dry. Relations between France and Nigeria continue to be strengthened by cultural and economic partnerships, and that's why on this National Day here in Lagos, the French consulate invited diplomats, the business community, and friends of France to celebrate with them.
Bastille Day, as it is popularly known in France, is the common name given in English-speaking countries to the National Day of France, which is celebrated on July 14 each year. Here in Nigeria, the day is spent in highlighting relations between France and Nigeria. They're building on the relations each year. This year's celebration, which took place at the French School in Victoria Island, was another opportunity to highlight these relations. The French Consul General to Lagos, Laurent Favier, speaks about the strata of partnerships between the two countries.
Our bilateral relationship with Nigeria has a story spanning many decades, and significant growth have been recorded recently. For example, 4 ministerial visits to Nigeria within 3 years, a state visit by President Tinubu in Paris last 18 months ago, and working of several governors in Paris. The climax was marked in 2025 with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja and in Lagos. And I promise you more to come in 2026. France and Nigeria have developed mutual ties that highlight in many ways the excellence of this relationship. Our two countries are capable of collaborating on the international scene and presenting convergent position to the world on major issues of our time. A recent example was the Africa Forward Summit, where Nigeria was massively represented in Nairobi with a high-level political delegation and members from the Franco-Nigerian Business Council, where new partnerships and contracts have been signed for Nigeria, but also for all the continent Africa. We also have good cooperation within the creative industry with Nigeria, and a good example with the vibrant Creative Forum Africa and the Cuties exhibition in Lagos last October.
Representing the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the State's Commissioner for Finance, Mr. Abayomi Oluyomi, says France and Lagos State do not need to build a bridge for relations, but need to stand firmly on the already existing one.
Lagos and France do not need to build a bridge to each other. We are already standing on one bridge. That bridge is strengthened by practical cooperation along transportation, infrastructure, energy, education, healthcare, culture, and enterprise. French institutions and businesses continue to work alongside public and private partners in Lagos. As our administration advances the Themes Plus agenda to build a more competitive, resilient, and inclusive megacity, we value France not only as a trusted friend, but also as a partner in progress.
Nigeria remains France's top trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa, accounting for roughly $3.9 billion in trade, while around 100 French companies operate in Nigeria in various sectors. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Still ahead on the program. Well, they seem to have gotten better now over time. They're throwing kicks and punches MMA style. Talking about the advent of humanoid robots. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. German prosecutors have charged a 68-year-old man suspected of drugging and raping 14 women he met online on online dating platforms and filming his attacks. The case has drawn comparisons with the high-profile case of Frenchwoman Giselle Pellicot. We're joined now by the DW correspondent Arthur Sullivan in Berlin. Arthur, thank you for joining us on the program. What are the main details of this case?
Yeah, so the investigation into this case began in March 2025. A 68-year-old suspect right here in the German capital, Berlin, had appeared on online chat logs with another man whom authorities were investigating separately. Now, that other man has since died. But the new investigation into this 68-year-old suspect gathered momentum when his home was searched last year and a number of devices there were found to contain footage of various sexual offences, rape and sexual assault. Now, this week, the case developed significantly when the prosecutors here in Germany charged this man with 22 counts of aggravated rape involving 14 women. Now, the total figure of victims is believed to be much higher, with 58 women suspected to have been raped, although many of them have not been identified yet, and in some of the other cases, investigations are ongoing. Now, the perpetrator here is strongly suspected of drugging the victims and filming the attacks and rapes, and he has been in detention since March. He has not made any comment on the case at this point. It's now up to the courts here to proceed, but the suspicion is that he met the women online and drugged them and raped them without any of them having any knowledge whatsoever of the attacks, and they only found out about these rapes and attacks when they were shown videos that had been retrieved by investigators.
Arthur, this case has drawn comparisons with the Pellico case in France, and it's just the latest in Germany of a high-profile mass rape case involving victims being drugged, isn't it?
Yeah, so this horrendous and extraordinary case of Gisèle Pellico, the French woman who was drugged by her own husband, raped by him and dozens of other men, that drew attention to these cases, which unfortunately are becoming increasingly common here in Europe, where victims are raped unbeknownst to them. And indeed, in many cases, there's collaboration between perpetrators online. And there is some parallels, clearly, with this case and the Pellico case, such as drugging the victims, secretly filming the attacks. And this latest case in Berlin comes less than a week after a separate case where a 32-year-old Chinese doctor who's long based here in Germany was sentenced to 5 years in jail for aggravated rape. And he was part of a wider investigation into a Telegram group which involved several perpetrators who were on the app sharing information about, methods in which they would commit their crimes, information about sedation and so on. And several of the men in that group have now been convicted. And that's against a wider backdrop of these types of cases in Europe. So earlier this month, investigators in the UK said that they had discovered an international network which was organising drug-facilitated sexual assault. And then separately, Europol, so that's the agency which combines different police forces here in Europe, it was working to identify more than 150 victims of drug-facilitated sexual assaults in 7 different countries. And the big thing with all these cases is that it shows sexual assault and rape cases know no boundaries, no distinction between class, occupation or creed. There are simply victims and perpetrators, and what's perhaps most shocking here is that in many of these cases, the perpetrators are sharing information online, doing it quite publicly in these Telegram groups and other online groups, and using their knowledge of separate attacks to lead to other attacks. So there seems to be more of these cases than we could have previously imagined.
How horrific, Arthur. Is this case, however, causing a major outcry in Germany and leading to debate around rape and laws related to it?
The case has made headlines in Germany, but so far it has not been a huge story, certainly not in any way comparable to the way that the Pellico case became this big global story and which made Gisèle Pellico a global feminist icon. Now, exactly why it hasn't is somewhat hard to say. I mean, one aspect here that's important to remember is that this case has not yet fully proceeded to court, so we haven't had a public trial yet. But it is important to remember as well that, unlike France and many other European countries, Germany is extremely protective of the identity, not just of victims, but also perpetrators of crimes. It's quite rare that perpetrators are named even after prosecution. Their rights to privacy are very strongly protected in Germany. But when one does examine this case closely, you would think that there probably should be a wider debate here, because it does shine a light on some of the issues with German law when it comes to rape. So, in particular, the case of drug-facilitated rape, there are specific issues. In this case, although 58 women are suspected of being victims in the case, one of the cases at least, and possibly more, falls outside the statute of limitations. So the statute of limitations in rape cases which are deemed not to involve the use of force is just 5 years. Now, that's a little bit hard to get your head around, because the act of rape, you would think, itself inherently involves force, but unfortunately for the case of one of these alleged victims, it may not proceed due to that statute of limitations. And then there's other issues around how the drugs used to sedate victims are classified. So 2 years ago, Germany's highest court ruled that so-called date rape drugs could not be classed as, quote, dangerous items in the context of sexual assault. So something like a knife or a gun would obviously be a dangerous item. But in this case, date rape drugs are not designated dangerous items. And what does that mean in practice? It means that if they're used in a rape, it doesn't guarantee the minimum sentence of 5 years, which would come about in the case of, for example, a knife or another dangerous item being used. So the government here is now looking to change this law, but on the whole, this case raises several questions about how difficult it is for victims of rape to ultimately get justice.
Indeed, Arthur, it's also the same here. It's quite difficult for them to get justice, quite difficult for them to be believed. Arthur Sullivan, the DW correspondent in Berlin. Now to bilateral issues. Namibia and South Africa are seeking to deepen economic ties as government and business leaders meet in Johannesburg, South Africa for the South Africa-Namibia Business Forum. It's expected to strengthen trade, boost investment and advance regional industrialization through closer cooperation under the Southern African Customs Union. Our correspondent Innocent Samosa has more.
South Africa is Namibia's largest trading partner, accounting for more than 30% of Namibia's imports and more than 22% of its exports, making South Africa a critical market for Namibian goods and a key supplier of manufactured products, machinery, fuel, food and consumer goods.
So I think what is very important for us is that we have a long traditional relationship as partners in terms of trade, as neighbors in terms of trade. I think in recent years we've also seen the trade increase. For example, from 2024 it grew from 92.5 billion rands total trade to around 101.5.
Despite their close economic ties, trade between South Africa and Namibia continues to face several challenges, including costly logistics, border delays, non-tariff barriers and limited industrial diversification. Business leaders argue that reducing these obstacles could unlock greater trade, investment and economic growth for both countries, particularly under the African Continental Free Trade Area.
The synergy, I think the reason why we are here today, it's really to find synergies in terms of technology, to find synergies in terms of manufacturing, to find synergies in terms of skills, and so that we can collaborate. So we've got the raw materials, you've got the technology, and we ask ourselves, how do we find synergy so that we can regain that trade balance that is really skewed at the moment?
Yes, I think like you're correctly putting it, that infrastructure is a challenge. And that's why recently I attended one of the infrastructure conferences in Nairobi, where we're talking about how do we plan infrastructure from a regional integration point of view. Because if we are going to have, for example, the goods that are going to be moving in our region, SADC specifically, we need to have the connectivity.
With the burning question of migration in South Africa, Brand South Africa says processes are underway to address the challenges.
From a branding perspective, it's unfortunate that we are labeled as xenophobic because South Africans are not xenophobic. You have pockets of individuals who, of course, will give xenophobic utterances, but that is not a reflection of the whole country. The country is clear. We are principled as a country. We've got Ubuntu, which is called, of course, I am because you are.
For South Africa, Namibia is an important regional export destination and investment partner. More than 50 South African companies have invested in Namibia over the past 3 years, injecting an estimated $1.2 billion into sectors including banking, mining, retail, renewable energy and property, while creating thousands of jobs. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
The World Health Organization has warned that the DRC's Ebola outbreak has become the third largest on record, saying the response is being outpaced despite progress in treatment and surveillance. Speaking in Geneva, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says 2,073 cases and 796 deaths have been reported since the outbreak was declared 2 months ago. He notes the epidemic has surpassed 2,000 cases in just 2 months, compared with more than 10 months during the 2018 to 2019 DRC outbreak. He says Ituri province remains the biggest concern, with more than 80% of new cases detected outside known contact lists. He's appealing to international donors to close a funding gap of more than $400 million for the joint WHO Africa CDC preparedness and response plan, describing the investment as essential for global health security rather than charity. And just before we go, let's take you to China, where humanoid robots are taking blows in what is described as the world's first free combat league in Shenzhen. A humanoid robot named White Eagle lands a crunching head kick on its rival during a full-scale robot fighting tournament inside an MMA-style cage at the Nanshan Cultural and Sports Center. According to Engine AI, the 1.73-meter tall T-800 can deliver uppercuts, spinning kicks while recovering quickly after being knocked down. The company says its posture control, dynamic perception, and shock absorption systems help it maintain balance under heavy impact. Engine AI founder and chief executive officer Zhao Tongyang says the tournament is designed to push humanoid robots beyond the laboratory. The bout marks the competitive debut of Ultimate Robot Knockout Legend, a freestyle combat league launched by Shenzhen-based robotics company Engine AI. Competitors are judged on more than striking power. Points are awarded for effective attack, stability, defensive and evasive moves, and each robot's ability to withstand punishment. Well, they certainly have improved. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.